Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the impact of measurement on educational psychology and school psychology. My name is Courtney Carr. To do this, we're going to look at 5 journal articles based on influential figures and their contributions to the social science community. We have Emil Kraepelin with non-sociological categories of mental illness, Pearson and Spearman with their correlation coefficients and its contribution to statistics, Lee Cronbach and his aptitude by treatment interaction and reliability, and lastly, Alfred Bennett and his invention of the standardized intelligence test. Our first influential member is Emil Kraepelin and his work with non-sociological categories of mental illness. Eric Engstrom wrote an article called Emil Kraepelin's Inaugural Election in Dorpat. Emil Kraepelin was a German psychiatrist who lectured at the University of Dorpat. He is best known for his research differentiating schizophrenia from manic depressive illness. In his first lecture at Dorpat, he stressed the need for more experimental research in psychology instead of using the pathoanatomic approach, which examines organs and tissues to conclude a diagnosis. Originally, Kraepelin was known for his work on pharmaceutical drugs in the William Wundt lab from 1832 to 1920. There are 2 historical events that led Kraepelin to the use of psychological experiments as part of his diagnostic approach. The first being mental illness as seen as a prolonged disorder with many stages instead of many different disorders. Asylum psychiatrists believe the disorder started out with melancholy, then into stages of mania, before finally arriving at delusions and psychosis. Moreover, they believed if they caught in early stages, a patient could be cured. The second was the idea that neuroscientists had in the 1870s and 1880s to strictly use brain tissue to diagnose mental disorders. Kraepelin, being a follower of Wundt, criticized these 2 ideas and altered his research going forward. The author noted Kraepelin's work at Dorpat led to his emphasis on experimental research. He set up a lab with the help of the university's machinists to create an instrument to measure motor functions such as handwriting, along with its association with sleep patterns. This work got him recognition at the university, and he started to gain student followers, setting up the basis for dissertation work on experimental psychology. He and others continued to work on measuring fatigue, attention span, and memory. One of the tests given was named after him, the Uchida-Kraepelin test, which is still being used today. Essentially, Kraepelin wanted to establish a battery of tests which would classify the status of mental patients like medical tested for biological disorders, in hopes of mapping out different psychological disorders. He noticed the same processes and hard work used in medical sciences could be applied to psychology. It is in this work that he began to differentiate schizophrenia and manic depression, leading the social, scientific, and medical communities to understand the possibility for many vast different sociological and psychological disorders. Next is Spearman and Pearson, and the effective use of Spearman and Kendall's correlation coefficients for association between 2 measured traits by Puth, Neuhauser, and Ruxton. Statistics is often used to measure the strength of association between 2 continuous variables, such as height and weight, meaning there are infinite number of possibilities for the combination of the 2, unlike birth gender, which is either male or female, and is considered a categorical or discrete variable. The authors originally produced an article listing Pearson's coefficient and how it could offer a valid description between the association of 2 variables even if the assumption of a normal bivariate was violated. However, Pearson, which is a parametric measure, is often not used for this type of test between 2 non-parametric measures, but Spearman and Kendall's are. The authors also noted a majority of the studies conducted in the Journal of Animal Behavior used Spearman and Kendall's as opposed to Pearson's. However, most studies never discussed why they chose the other 2 over Pearson's. Therefore, Puth, Neuhauser, and Ruxton conducted a study to see if the original claim they made, Pearson's coefficient being used for these types of tests, was just as valid as the use of the other 2 correlation coefficients. The results of their study indicated Pearson's results were similar, even if the data was not normally distributed. Also, for studies that did not use Pearson's, there was no apparent reason to choose Kendall over Spearman's. However, the authors did notice if there were no tied values, meaning almost 2 identical results in the data, then Kendall's produced more narrow confidence intervals. As opposed to if there are ties in the data, then it's necessary to use Spearman's as the ties were significant and had large correlation values. Our third influential figure is Cronbach, and his work on aptitude treatment as a framework for individual differences in psychotherapy by Richard Snow. Cronbach coined the modern definition of ATI after following the lead from Bennett's intelligence test and his thinking on psychotherapy. Snow lets us know the importance of defining ATI along with its various variables in order to establish clear communication, as this method has mixed understandings abroad. First, aptitude can be defined as any measurable characteristics said to be ready for alteration due to treatment, such as personality, motivation, learning styles, and attitudes and belief towards learning and change. Second is treatment, which are the characteristics of a manipulative situation. For example, treatment environment, which can be clinical versus office, group versus individual, or things like therapist characteristics such as age, race, and religion. While these characteristics often do not change, how patients choose to interact with them does. Lastly, interaction is known as the degree to which results for two or more treatments differ for persons who also differ on one or more aptitude measures, be them qualitative or quantitative. For instance, would treatment A or treatment B be better suited for this individual based on their trait A or trait B? Also, there is a need to define ATI. It is a method used for psychologists for treatment evaluation and for the research on psychotherapy treatments. Often, when research is derived in the field, scientists want to know if this is better than other methods and what can be done to improve the current method. Moreover, it is important to answer the question best for whom, when, and why when it comes to treatment designs based on individual differences. Current research addresses aptitude distribution, treatment and therapist characteristics, therapist-client matching, ecological validity, outcome variables, aggression, and person independence. ATI has impacted each of these subjects and currently assists in driving and validating further research in the social science community. Our fourth and last influential figure is Alfred Binet in the Standardized Intelligence Test. Nicholas et al. Wrote an article entitled Sick or Slow on the Origins of Intelligence as a Psychological Object. Alfred Binet and his research intern Theodore Simon created the Simon-Binet test, which has now become the Stanford-Binet test after a follower of Binet's, Lewis Terman via Lightner-Whitmer, created the updated version in the 1920s. To begin, we need to know the test is ultimately a result of three things: compulsory schooling and an ongoing battle with psychiatrist Desire Maglone Bournville, who wanted to send mentally handicapped children to asylums. Because of compulsory schooling, a law which was passed by France to have all healthy children begin the ages of 6 and 13 attend school, many teachers were complaining about the mentally incapable students and how they were a burden to the classroom. Therefore, the Department of Education was forced to set up a committee to investigate how to best handle this situation. The committee was named the Burgess Committee, which, along with Bournville, Binet was an influential member and sought to seek a solution to this problem. At the time, because of the work of Bournville and his colleague, famous psychiatrist Jean-Martin Charcot, abnormal children were removed from normal schools and sent to asylums. While this was not originally Bournville's ideal scenario for handicapped children, it's the product of his influence on society and his perspective. His training led him to take a medical approach and not a psychological one. Therefore, the results of his screening were not standardized, and many children with mental handicaps were removed and put in hospitalized settings. When seeing this, Binet could not stand by, as he noticed these children were merely afflicted and not sick. Hence, they didn't need to be hospitalized, but given help in normal schools, in a special environment, or special education classrooms. In order to do this, Binet knew he would have to prove, by way of the committee, a reason to change French law and create special education classrooms. Therefore, he came up with a standardized test to measure different levels of intelligence to group children so they could receive the specialized help they needed. With the help of his research assistant, Theodore Simon, Binet created a 30-item test, which was easily measured, replicable, and only took about 30 minutes to administer. After much debate, nearly 2 years later, the result of Binet's study paid off, and special education classrooms were initiated and became part of French law in 1909. Contemporary implications lie with the work done after Binet's death, when Jean Piaget, Lightner Whitmer, and Lewis Terman brought the test to America. Lightner Whitmer helped to create the field of school psychology and differentiate it from clinical psychology, while Louis Terman and colleague Goddard attended Stanford and updated and adapted the test to become the version we currently use today. Our last slide is on Bennett's test. Leo Miller wrote an article entitled "Some Results of Testing Elementary School Pupils with the Stanford Revision of the Bennett-Simon Test." Miller was a Kansas City principal who originally was a fifth-grade teacher in a large school. He noticed one of his students had evident difficulties and could not keep up with the assignments in class despite the fact that she had normal vision and screening along with an IQ of 120 from a test taken in kindergarten. He wanted this student retested, but was told not much of a difference would be seen. However, he persisted and got the student retested. The results were an 87. Obviously, this was much different than before, so when he became a principal, he conducted a study to see how often this occurred in students. The study was conducted by testers from the Psychological Clinic of Kansas City Public Schools. 90 students, 45 boys, and 45 girls' test results were used. These students were selected because they had been most recently tested. Each of the students was originally given the 1916 version of the Stanford Binet test upon entering kindergarten or first grade, and then administered the 1937 version of the Stanford Binet test upon graduating 8th grade. Study results indicated of the plus variation, meaning their test results were better the second time around. 22 girls were in the group and 31 boys. Of the minus variation, meaning their results were worse the second time, 23 girls were in the group and there were 12 boys. Therefore, the data shows boys are more likely to gain IQ points over time, where girls are less likely to show gains in IQ points over time. Hence, the author noted intelligence tests should not be used as a sole measurement of placement, but as a guide to help make adjustments for students' course selection in vocational classes. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Please comment for any questions.